Alright, so this is going to be a follow-up to my Shelby Foote video I made. I am currently, let's see here, into Volume 2 of the Civil War trilogy, Fredericksburg to Meridian. I have just finished Chapter 3, which ended with the Battle of Chancellorsville, so I'm 319 pages into the second volume. And right now it looks like the next section is going to be on the Vicksburg campaign. The Beleaguered City is the title of this chapter. So let's see. Am I going to make it to Gettysburg? I believe chapter 5. Okay, so Stars in Their Courses is the title of chapter 5. And that begins on page 428. So I have to get through this section here in order to get there. So it looks like I'm gonna make it. I'm making much progress in reading this. I had put it down for quite a while and finished it, and I'm really chugging through it now. You know, now that I picked it up and committed to reading it, I'm making good progress. I wanted to say about, like, why the Civil War. Another thing, Civil War. Okay, so last time around, I don't want it to be thought that I'm some kind of lost causer or something, okay? The fact is that the view that we have of history is very much distorted. My interest in the Civil War started probably in the 4th grade. We had to do a book report, or not a book report, but we did a unit on the American Civil War back then, and we drew generals out of a hat, and we all had to do a report on whichever historical figure it was. So somebody got, Harriet Tubman, somebody got Robert E. Lee, somebody got Abraham Lincoln. It was just kind of like we all drew names out of a hat, and then each of us had to do a study on the person that we were assigned randomly, and then present it to our classmates. Just a couple pages, and I happened to draw Stonewall Jackson. So I did a report on Stonewall Jackson way back in the 4th grade. So it's kind of when I got the bug. When I was in high school, I knew more about the Civil War than any of my classmates. This would have been junior high, actually. No, it was high school. It would have been, sophomore? It was either my sophomore or junior year. I can't remember right off my head. But I'd been into it for a long time. I think what fascinates me so much about it is that whereas the Revolutionary War earned us our independence, the Civil War determined what kind of nation this was going to be. And I think the great tragedy of what it's become now is it's so loaded, especially in the past 15 years or so, that you can't really have a conversation about it. If you critique, for instance, Abraham Lincoln, people would just go, "What are you? Are you a racist or something?" No, it's the fact that Lincoln violated the Constitution, and so profusely violated the Constitution. There was a lot of things going on in this country. There was a struggle between Federalist and Anti-Federalist, between the ideals of Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, what kind of government that we were going to have. And unfortunately, I can't hold up and say that the Confederacy was some beacon of states' rights or anything like that, which you would like to think. It's just not true. Many of the things that you accuse Lincoln of, suspending habeas corpus, the crack down on First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. These things are things that the South did as well. Conscription of troops. The Confederacy did it. The use of greenbacks instead of, golden coin. The South did it too. So it's difficult. But the fact is that these things that happened, the country that we had prior to 1860, 1861, and the country that emerged out of the fires of the Civil War in 1865. We're not a republic anymore. I know that on paper we are a republic, but this is an empire. Lincoln, and you're going to say, oh, you're a Marxist. No, I don't believe in communism. This isn't Karl Marx garbage speaking here. This is a fact. We have become an imperialist nation. And you can trace the trajectory of the whole thing following Lincoln's government. Maybe even to an extent starting with James Polk with the Mexican-American War. Polk had imperialist ambitions, but especially after Lincoln. Lincoln is used as a guide or a signpost for everybody that comes after him for the abuse of executive power. They can always point, well, look at Lincoln, look what Lincoln did. And Lincoln was terrible, and he gets a pass because of emancipation. But the Emancipation Proclamation was a political ploy, if you look into it at all. It was to basically keep Europe from recognizing the Confederacy. It was to shame them by trying to take what was the original aim of the war effort, which was preservation of the Union, and shift the goalpost to include emancipation of slavery. But the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free any slaves. It only freed slaves in the areas where Lincoln had no power to do so. It didn't free any slaves in the areas that were under federal control, like Delaware, or Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, these Union-controlled territories. And even in places like West Virginia, right, which seceded from Virginia. So secession is allowed. Lincoln's whole thing, secession is not permitted, but if they secede in our favor, then it is permitted. So you can't secede unless it's to join the Union. Ridiculous. The guy is a contradiction, and he gets this pass. He's almost like deified, like the cult of Lincoln. Unfortunately, the American experiment died, and it's a good thing we had emancipation. I'm glad that slavery came to an end, but we're talking about the death of 700,000, estimates now, up to 1 million. We don't really know for sure. That number keeps on going. It keeps on getting readjusted, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 700,000 Americans currently, I think, is what the estimates stand at, died in the Civil War. And the aftermath of it, the hate and the division that exists to this day because of bloodshed, because of war being waged on Americans, which the war was illegal. Lincoln never had a formal declaration by Congress to wage that war. The status of the South. Are they a foreign country, or are they simply states that are in rebellion? And if they're simply states that are in rebellion, then you have to have the governors of those states' involvement in calling federal intervention. So it doesn't really matter now, does it? But you can trace all the problems that we have today with government, with large government, with the expansion of government, and draw a straight line back to Abraham Lincoln and centralized authority in, Washington, D.C. I mean, Lincoln created the IRS, for crying out loud. Out of control taxation was a birth child of Lincoln. Lincoln preserved the Union by destroying freedom. And again, it's a very complicated subject because it's almost impossible to talk about any of it because of the issue of slavery being involved. That any nuance in the thing, talking about, and I'm not a denier. I believe that slavery is the central issue of the war, but to ignore issues like constitutionality of the things that Lincoln did, such as issuing for the arrest of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, deporting political opponents, jailing the legislature of Maryland so that they couldn't vote to secede from the Union. So he obstructed his state legislature. These are things that he did that just don't get talked about. He gets a pass because the Emancipation Proclamation, but it's a fraudulent thing. The Emancipation Proclamation is a political stunt. Lincoln himself said that he had no intentions of abolishing slavery, and he didn't believe that he had the constitutional authority to do so. And if you think that the North was a bunch of lovers of African Americans, they weren't. Lincoln's home state, Illinois, passed legislation to deny African Americans the ability to settle and live there. The entire country was racist. Everybody was racist across the board. It's sad. It's a dark blight in our nation's history, and but it's part of our history. And it's unfortunate that we can't have a conversation about it. Instead, we have to destroy history. We have to abolish history and pretend that none of this stuff matters. We have to boil it all down to black and white, good guys versus bad guys, and equate the Grand Army of the Republic as the saviors of the universe, and the Confederacy as Hitler, Nazi death squads. We have to paint them as the most evil, wicked people on the face of the planet, and the North is the righteous good guys. And I'm saying that there really weren't any good guys. There were good guys, but what I'm saying is that all around, it's all shades of gray. And there are really deep-rooted issues that we can't even discuss. History has become a joke. Nobody cares about it anymore, especially young people. They're too busy watching the latest Disney Plus show, or complaining about arguing over the latest Marvel movie or whatever. It's ridiculous. So I'm reading this. Okay, I will have an update when I finish this, but I just want to say this is a very fine piece of work that Shelby Foote has done. This was a massive undertaking, and everybody should read this at least once in your lifetime. I've read a lot of Civil War books. These are among some of the finest that I've ever read. So that's really all I have to say. Just doing a check-in. We're coming up on the 160th anniversary of Gettysburg here on July 1st. So 160 years ago, the turning point of the Civil War. with the fall of Vicksburg and Gettysburg pretty much on the same day. You know, Union troops taking Vicksburg out west, and then Lee's crushing defeat at Gettysburg kind of put the proverbial nail in the coffin of the Confederacy. Now, they would fight on for a couple more years, but they would never be able to mount or field a type of assault like that into Northern Territory ever again. So, all right, signing off. God bless. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day.